We're coming up in just a few days, in 10 days' time, in fact. It's the 5th anniversary of our teacher, Zen Master Shindan, his death. He died during the lockdown, during the COVID period. And so at the time, we weren't able to get together to mourn his death, nor were we able to get together to celebrate his life. And so we're doing it now a little bit more. And one of the things I've been pulling up is I want to show you one of his calligraphies here. This one where you might recognize this character. Where are we? This character. This is Mu, or no, or not. And then this one down here, this is, where are we? Life. And then this one is death. No life, no death. Or birth. No birth, no death. You could translate it like that as well. So he's 5 years dead. What are we talking about? No life, no death. This was one of his English language phrases that he liked to say. If you ever spent any time around him, you very likely heard him say, no life, no death. Every single one of us could probably reel off immediately our date of birth. And every single one of us knows that at a certain point, they'll be able to list up our date of death, like we can for Zen Master Shinzan. So why would he create an artwork like this, saying no life, no death? What's he pointing at? Well, if we think about you as perhaps a 7-year-old, can we meet that 7-year-old? Can we talk to that 7-year-old? Can we interact with that 7-year-old? No. You are now, whatever age you are, there's nobody I can see who looks anywhere near 7 years old. But that 7-year-old isn't dead. We're not mourning for that 7-year-old. Perhaps sometimes we are. There can be a sense of, things in the process of life kind of moving on, and nostalgia, looking back, this kind of thing. But generally speaking, we don't spend our life sort of mourning those earlier phases of our life. But when it comes to teachers, that can really happen. It seems like in the early days of Buddhism, that's what happened. So in the very early days, the Buddha was around. If you had a question, you could go and ask him. You could go and meet him personally. You could speak to him, interact with him. The Buddha was a living presence and exemplar and reality in your life. And then at about 85 years old or so, he passed away. But perhaps you still had memories of him. Or certainly, perhaps you were around some of his senior students who'd spent many years with him, and perhaps they had many stories about his life and so on, and perhaps you would have felt close to the Buddha. But then, gradually, those senior students would have died off, I suppose, and then perhaps the next generation, they might have had stories to tell that they'd heard, but it was all second-hand, and then in the next generation, third-hand, and so on. And so there is, in some of the early Buddhist texts, a little bit of kind of a pessimistic feeling, almost like the real good stuff is kind of disappearing in the rear-view mirror, as it were. We're getting further and further away from it. But a whole new kind of approach to the teaching arose after a while that kind of took a very different stance towards this. Perhaps the most important of these new sutras, these new teachings, was called the Lotus Sutra. And in it, there are many stories. one of the stories that's in there, you have a doctor. He's got a whole bunch of kids, and it looks like he's a widower. His wife doesn't seem to be around. So one day, the doctor gets called off to do some important medical work with a patient who's at some distance to the house. So the kids are left by themselves in the house. And kids being kids, they break into his medicine cabinet and they get well and truly stoned. Kids have always been kids, I guess. And so, he's got some pretty strong things stashed away there in his treatment room, no doubt. And by the time he's coming back, his kids are absolutely 3 sheets to the wind. So he comes into the house and they're so out of it that he just can't get through to them. There's just no reaching them. So he goes back out of the house again and he has a little think. And he gets a friend of his from somewhere close by to do him a favor. The friend sort of makes his clothes a bit sort of rough and ready and dishevels his hair and runs in the house and sort of, looking very sad and distressed and everything, says to the kids, "Your father has died. Your father has died." And the shock of this announcement kind of sobers up the kids. And they kind of filter out of the house and they're standing in the front garden waiting for them is their father. Now in this story, of course, the father is the Buddha. And the Buddha goes on to explain that his life is, he talks enormous astronomical numbers, his lifespan, effectively beginningless and endless. That birth and death, in the sense of the shock of birth and death, are there to wake us up to something, or sober us up, if you like, to something beginningless and endless. Because the promise here, of course, is if the Buddha's life is beginningless and endless, so is yours. What on earth would that mean? We all know we've got a birth date, a death date. What would it mean to have a beginningless, endless life? What would this mean? Well, the Lotus Sutra, the teaching that puts forward this way of looking at reality, this way of engaging with reality, that kind of puts forward this conception of this life of Buddha, this one great life in which we all share, is somewhat echoed in modern science. The physicists tell us that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It just changes form. How would it be if you could be neither created nor destroyed? You just changed form. Now, I don't think this stands against the sense that if you like, the personality level of us, it's constantly changing, but, there's a sort of a beginning and an end of that. A bit like perhaps in an ocean. There's a wave that rises up, runs for a while, and then sinks back into the ocean again. So on that level, you could say there is a beginning and an end to the wave. But to sort of continue the watery metaphor, how would it be if you were more like a river than a thing? Last summer, I got to walk the length of the River Seine from the mouth up to Paris. It was about 3 weeks of walking. And of course, as I was walking upstream, not one drop of that water that was there as I was looking down into it at the end of my walk in Paris would have been there at the beginning of it. Not one drop. But we can still call it the River Seine. If your life was like that river, constantly changing, constantly on the move, constantly flowing, beginningless and endless. The River Seine was there when Julius Caesar was around. We have accounts of him crossing the river. It was there when Joan of Arc was actually executed on the banks of the river. It was there when Monet, the great artist, spent almost his whole life painting different vistas along the length of the river. But none of those people saw the same water that I did. So this teaching of no life, no death, is inviting us to soften up a little bit, to let go, to relax. If you're a river, a constantly changing river through your life, those elements that make you up must have been there before your life, will carry on after your life. And anyway, any one moment in your life is just the river in that moment. The name remains the same, but the water's different. It's easy to play word games with this kind of thing, but much more important is we can touch this experientially. This teaching of no life, no death, from the Lotus Sutra, from Zen Master Shinzan, is inviting us as we sit in our zazen, as we sit in our meditation, to let go, to open our hands, to allow the water of life to flow through us, to flow as us, to allow life, death, all of it to just go through. And your most intimate thing is universal. As you see and directly connect with your beginningless, endless life of Buddha, you automatically start to see this all around you. It's not me and my life and then everything else in a different order. No, it's all one. It's all happening. It's all constantly here. And if we allow our hands to open, if we allow our sort of grip on our fixed sense of reality to kind of soften, then this can come into view. And we can know that there's nothing to fear. There's nothing to fear in life. There's nothing to fear in death. And in fact, this beginningless, endless life of Buddha that is our life, that always was and can only be our life, becomes more and more our living, everyday experience. And then we can be happy, because that's what we're built for. That's where we're kind of designed to be. The more we kind of try to fix things and glom things together and stick it all into some kind of, some sort of, some sort of structure, the more it's like we're pinning butterflies on the wall. The pinning them on the wall destroys the very life of the butterfly. It never works. Now, at times it's useful to abstract. At times it's useful to operate on the level of, it's my sister's birthday tomorrow and I'm going to give her a card on that day. That's just skillful operating. But as long as we don't get fixed into that level is the only reality of things, then we can allow this much deeper, richer sense of things. And the more you touch into your life of Buddha, the more you touch into Zen Master Shinzan's life of Buddha, you can know what he was operating from, where he was in his life. You can touch the fierce joy that he actually exhibited, manifested day by day. Now, one of the reasons that we put together a book with his artwork and his calligraphies is in East Asia, there's a very strong conception that somebody's marks that they make, the brushwork that they create, actually sort of manifests their spirit, that life of Buddha. So, you can actually meet somebody through their brushwork. And in fact, we have something similar. I mean, so many people collect autographs, for example. That's kind of what they are, really, isn't it? And there's even a more developed kind of quality of handwriting analysis and this kind of thing in the Western world that I gather has some degree of psychological research underpinning it. But this sense that somebody's life and spirit is portrayed in their artworks is very, very much heightened in East Asia. So we can meet Master Shinzan in things like his artwork. But we don't need anything like that. We can meet him more directly still. Because this life of Buddha is something that we share. We all share. We are all this life of Buddha. And there's not really any getting away from it. We can, as it were, turn away from it, but the underlying reality remains the same. And so the Buddha, in his very graphic language, calls the first level of awakening, the first stage of awakening, entering the stream. And I think that's a beautiful way of describing on a practice level how we can relate to this reality. How would it be if right now, at this practice session where we're going to be sitting together, we're going to be doing Zazen together, how about each one of us individually right now, we just plunge into this stream. We just allow the river of life to flow. We allow this beginningless, endless life of Buddha to be our life as it is. Nothing we need to earn. There's nothing we need to kind of get better at or practice or anything. We can just let go. The only thing that blocks it or blocks our connection with it is that human tendency to grip, to fix. So when we notice we're doing that, if we just open our hands, we can come back again. It's very simple. Libraries full of books seem to be written every year about this stuff that we're doing. It's really very simple. The invitation is there. We can plunge into the river of life, and it's all waiting for us. It's all right here, right now. No birth, no death. No life, no death. It's all this life of Buddha. You might enjoy looking into the Lotus Sutra. It's a very important text, as I say. Zen Master Hakuin one day he was studying it, and just in the middle of studying the text, bam, his definitive awakening happened, literally while he was studying the Lotus Sutra. But before that time, all his practice was really about himself, sorting himself out. After that time with the Lotus Sutra, his practice had matured to the level where he could give his life to others, where he could share this with others, where he could invite others to enter and enjoy the river of life. So our sort of background, our tradition, has got a lot of deep connection with this beautiful teaching. So, how about we sober up and plunge in?